Hey everyone, it's Chris from Revolutions Per Movie here. I just wanted to say a quick happy holidays and hope that you all have a safe New Year's. I just want to thank everyone in advance who has listened, reviewed, and told their friends about the show and supported the Patreon. As you can gather from me doing the show, it just helps my brain and heart, and I hope that in some way it does for you too. So thank you. Since this week's episode lands on a holiday, I thought I'd bring over one of the previous bonus episodes from the Revolutions Per Movie Patreon so you can hear what we're doing over there. It's a great interview with actor-comedian Galen Howard about the Tom Waits film Big Time, so I wanted to share that with you all today. And again, thank you to anyone who has supported the show on Patreon. It helps me to keep the show independent and up and running, and to keep creating the show I want to make without any outside interference, which is getting quite prominent in the podcast world. So thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next year, and enjoy the show. My guest this week is Galen Howard. Galen is an LA-based character actor who proudly hails from the liberal college town bubble of Davis, California. His acting career has taken him from guerrilla indie film to high-budget television and everything in between. He is best known for his recurring roles on the shows Book of Boba Fett, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Physical with Rose Byrne. In the music video world, Galen has worked with such artists as Weezer, Justin Timberlake, Panic at the Disco, Disclosure, Shine Down, Train, Smashing Pumpkins, St. Paul and the Broken Bones, Ellie King, and others. He's received praise for his performance in the critically acclaimed death-positive comedy drama Moon Manor, and over the years, Galen has worked with such notable filmmakers as Robert Rodriguez, Jon Favreau, Marc Romanek, Jared Hess, Rusty Cundiff, and John Hillcoat, director of The Road and Lawless, who says of Galen, he is a rare gem of a character, genuine eccentricity that shines. And it is my great pleasure to welcome to Revolutions Per Movie, Galen Howard. Hi, Galen.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. You picked Big Time, the Tom Waits, I guess you could call it a concert film. It's a little more than that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, from 1988, directed by Chris Blum. But before we get into it, I have you here. I have questions for you about your life as a character actor.
Amazing.
What is that like to be the go-to guy to be like, yeah, let's put him in Boba Fett. Okay, let's have him recur on 9-9. What is the life like of being someone who's chosen to be in all these different types of work?
Completely unpredictable. It's, there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. I mean, you mentioned the thing on Boba Fett, and it's all you're a puzzle piece, and if you're doing you have a very I have a very particular look and kind of characters I play, so it just it depends on kind of what they're looking for and kind of how they, and what's that one puzzle piece, what's that one hole that you fill, and with Boba Fett, that was like a kind of a more kind of a comic moment in that sci-fi universe, and I do play a lot of kind of comedic characters or fill comedic moments, so it's all kind of it's very unpredictable. Like my my role in Brooklyn Nine-Nine was a little walk-on in a couple scenes. I had maybe one line, and then it was like 3 or 4 years later, they brought me back in the final season. Uh-huh. So, because again, it was just, I was playing like the side character family of one of the characters. So, they kind of brought those people back into the final season. It's very predictable because it's all just, you're kind of at the whim of what people need, kind of what they're looking for. And,
sure.
Especially when you're so specific, it's just like, if you're the flavor that they need and that you're that one ingredient they need in that stew, then that works out. But it's all, there's no rhyme or reason to any of it.
It's kind of amazing. I've seen people do like cosplay of you from
yes.
Boba Fett. I'm like, wow, what an honor. I mean, you have an iconic look. Everybody who's listening to this, when you see the photo of him, you'll be like, I know who you're talking about.
Right.
They will recognize you.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a blessing, and obviously an honor to be in that in that cinematic universe. But it just there's an inevitable iconography and just with that whole franchise. So so I've been that's obviously the one I get recognized for the most.
Right. And you talk about whatever they're looking for to put in this thing, but you've been in so many music videos where you often are a singular lead character.
A few times, yeah.
Carrying the weight of an entire music video. That's got to be quite a bit of pressure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's it's so interesting. There's a certain amount of pressure, but it's also, I mean, with music videos, it's great. I mean, music videos are just kind of, as far as like casting and performance, it's kind of a sidestep, like kind of a cousin to a commercial, where it's like they're looking for something very specific. They're, commercials are all about casting type, and so in the case of some of those music videos I've done, where it's like kind of they're focusing on a lead character, a lead actor, you're kind of like the spokesperson for that video. In a way,
Sure.
You're kind of commercial. Music videos are basically commercials for the band, so you're basically just the spokesperson for that, for their product. And so it's interesting. I kind of try to boil down like what they, what's the tone of the piece, what's the narrative, all of that, and just kind of stay true to that. It's usually pretty clear what they need you for, and if they need adjustments, they kind of find it. And sometimes they have something kind of general, and they just kind of find it in the moment. So it's
right.
Which I love. I love that part of the process.
What's been your favorite one to work on?
I mean, the Weezer video I did was so it's very interesting. Like probably my two favorites are completely different in their production. Like the Weezer video I did was basically a lyric video that for their song "Thank God for Girls" that was basically shot in like probably about an hour in their studio, in the production studio, and it was basically me just eating cannoli and then just like making a gigantic mess of them. When that video dropped, it kind of had a little viral run, and like actually became more popular than their official video for that song.
Right.
And then another one I did, the video Energy for the band Disclosure, was a very elaborate production shot over a weekend on film. That was kind of a throwback to like things like Fantastic Planet and Fantastic Voyage, and specifically the sperm sketch in Everything You Want to Know About Sex. So it has this very retro feel to it and very cinematic. That was so much fun to be a part of that kind of level of production. As a film buff, it's just seeing all the detail that's going into everything.
Is there a band you would die to be in a video for?
Of anyone, it would actually probably be the artist we're covering today. I mean,
right.
He's probably still my favorite artist, probably my seminal, if not my favorite, then probably the most seminal artist for me as far as what my kind of taste has been based on going forward.
Right. And so where was your entry point in his career with finding out about Tom Waits, and how did you discover him?
Probably, it was like in high school. I think I was kind of peripherally aware of him. I think, would hear like, Piano's Been Drinking on the radio and stuff like that, or hear him in a movie and, on a soundtrack and be like, who's that guy? But I think my first real like immersive exposure to him was the album that's featured probably most prominently on this, in this concert video, is Frank's Wild Years.
Yes.
I think growing up, we, might have like a sibling or a friend who exposes us to who we kind of, get exposed to a lot of music from. I think I had a classmate in high school, like we would like exchange tapes and CDs and kind of like turn each other on to stuff. And before the days of Spotify and iTunes and YouTube, so I was discovering all of this this stuff that I would either discover through friends or the radio or a record store. So that's how I discovered him. And it was like, as that first moment, I mean, there's that, the way the album starts with those horns on Hang On St. Christopher.
Yeah.
And I think from that moment, I knew this was my guy.
It's so funny, because I associate Tom Waits with my youth too. It was like my college music.
Yeah,
I'm a little older than you.
Yeah.
So for some reason, That trilogy, Swordfish Trombones, Rain
Yep.
Dogs, and Frank Wild Years were like pivotal to me,
Oh,
like studying or just putting it on when people were over, because it was so cinematic.
oh
And
yeah.
I grew up with a lot of cinematic music, listening to The Residents and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I grew up like Laurie Anderson was a big
Totally.
one.
But there was something funny about the time and place of Tom Waits, what he was doing then. And also, my parents had Tom Waits records from earlier that
Yeah.
were so different. And,
Right.
they did not connect with me. It was like, oh, this is in with my parents. My mom had The Stranger by Billy Joel. And, this was kind of
Yeah.
next to it. It was like,
Yeah, like Small Change and Heart of Saturday Night.
yeah, singer-songwriter stuff that I kind of didn't mind, but it felt like very adult, right?
Yes.
And so when this came around, I'd already seen him in films as an actor. And, so it was this weird thing of being like, I could put the face and the character of this person to this music. And what was interesting was this, I opened the store in 1996, the video store. This was a really hard film to get. And I had not seen this film till you had recommended it. I could not get it on VHS. There was no 35 millimeter print found until 2010. It's on VHS only. They keep saying they're going to re-release it on DVD or something, and it just hasn't happened. So it's really interesting. I thought it was going to be very hard to find. I didn't know it was just on streaming, which was kind of incredible.
Yeah. Well, they have the video dub of it, out there. I think it was on they just took it off Tubi. It was on Tubi for a second.
Well, there you go, audience. Enjoy.
Yeah. But you can find it. I think like I found it on like Internet Archive.
Yes.
You can do a little bit of sleuthing and find it out there. It's at a few places. Actually, the Cinephile video store out here in Santa Monica has it has it streaming on their website right now.
Oh, amazing.
Too. Yeah, so there are ways to find it out there. But yeah, it's hard to find any physical copies of it. I've actually become casual acquaintances with Tom Waits' longtime tour manager Stuart Ross, and was chatting with him a little bit. And he says the issue is that they can't find the original print anywhere. It's just like because of the rights changing owners, it gets lost in various libraries. So at this point, it's looking very unlikely that we'll ever get a proper DVD re-release.
Right. Which is amazing considering the stature of Tom Waits at that point in his career.
Yeah.
And the genesis of this film is really weird too. I don't know if you knew, but it was a stage play.
Yeah, Frank's Wild Years. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I think Gary Sinise directed it. Or
yes, he was not the original director. The original director of it was fired due to difficulties between Tom Waits and himself.
That's right. I think I remember that.
So they had to restage it. It's kind of amazing. Like the New York Times was not super kind about it. They say it cannot be counted a complete success, but there are reasons for its problems. But right after the Chicago run, Mr. Waits and his band, which plays in this show, will record its songs as an album, which is, what became Frank's Wild Years.
Exactly.
But he also says, in translating the image onto the stage, Mrs. Brennan and Mr. Waits, Mrs. Brennan being
his wife, Kathleen,
yes, have created a 2-act drama centering on the down-and-out Frank O'Brien shivering on a snowy East St. Louis park bench on St. Patrick's Day. The plot consists of dream appearances by his 4 closest friends, along with fantasy success in Las Vegas and his encounter with a television evangelist.
Yes.
And knowing that and seeing this film, it makes a little more sense what he's pulling from it.
Exactly.
Because this film was way different than what I expected of a concert film.
Right.
And I think going through and reading some of the reviews of it, some people were really not up to speed on what Tom Waits was trying to do here.
Yeah, it's certainly not the best introduction to him if you're not familiar.
No, not at all.
With what, you need some context here, absolutely.
There's a ton of interstitial stuff in it. Songs are cut, in half, and then you see, somebody in a lobby. But before we get deep into the film, did you see this in the theater? How did you find it?
I only, saw it once it came out, once it was like available online. Yeah, because it was,
Uh-huh.
again, yeah, something I don't think I ever was able to find a copy at the video store, or anything like that. My town had, some deep cuts in their, VHS selection growing up. And yeah, this was just one of those things that just was not available for the longest time. So it was a, real boon at the, days of like YouTube and streaming, and when this kind
Yes.
of started floating around.
Yeah, it's wild because, I had this massive music section. I was really proud of, the store. That was like my, section. I was like, this makes us different than any
Yeah,
other store in the nation, was just my curation of that.
that's so
And
cool.
I just couldn't find anyone who was willing to part with their VHS tape of Big Time. They were just like, no.
Yeah,
Like no
yeah,
one. I was always looking for it for sale on eBay and things like that. And it was elusive.
yeah.
And it was also in the time where it wasn't buy it now prices, it was like auction prices. So you're
Yes.
competing with, 100 other Tom Waits people who have not seen the
Yeah,
film.
fanatics. Yeah.
And you're just like, I'm tapping out. I'm done. You can
Right.
have
Yeah.
it.
It's going.
You
Yeah.
know?
It's like it's yeah, going up into the hundreds, and yeah.
Yeah. But the film was made by Chris Blum, who
Hmm.
was Waits' friend and collaborator, and he directed a lot of the videos for Frank's Wild Years, but he also did Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire,"
Sure did.
which I was like, what a weird career.
Yes.
This is my favorite period of Tom Waits in terms of, who he has in the band and what they're bringing to it. You got Marc Ribot,
Yep.
who really changed the sound
He
of
sure
Tom
did.
Waits' music
That
with his
yeah,
guitar
that
work.
guitar was
It just was like so exciting as somebody who obviously knew where he was coming from. But then
Mhm.
you've got, Ralph Carney, who is just a super legendary multi-instrumentalist,
Yeah. R.I.P.
who's
Yeah.
worked with everyone from Bill Laswell to Elvis Costello.
I
And
know.
then you've got, I didn't know who the bass player was, but it's Greg Cohen, and he
Hmm.
was part of John Zorn's Masada.
Which makes sense. Yeah. I mean, and then with the horns and everything, there's so much Zorn kind of elements in this.
Laurie Anderson, Dogmar Krause of the Art Bears. It all
Ooh.
made sense. But what was cool about the Tom Waits thing, I felt like when I was experiencing when I was younger, was kind of like a successful meshing of noir storytelling, which was really starting to seep into like every indie filmmaker, Soderbergh. All these people were starting to make their indie film,
A
right?
lot of that neo noir stuff. Yeah.
Jim Thompson was starting to show up on the repress shelves.
Stuff like To Live and Die in L.A. and
Yes.
things like yeah.
And then this is coming out, and it was just so satisfying. I don't know. I found it very accessible.
Yeah, it's it's very yeah. I mean, I think for the time, I mean, it's yeah. I think yeah, especially for that time. I mean, growing up, being a Tom Waits fan, it was the kind of music that would definitely set me apart from my peers, with my as far as what other people were listening to. I mean, I was always kind of left of center in my tastes, but Tom Waits was one of those that, especially at that time, when people are listening to, I don't know, like Marcy Playground and Sixpence None the Richer, and
Sure.
I'm putting on, Rain Dogs. It's
Right.
it's a very different. It's quite a contrast.
You said that a Tom Waits video would be something that you would love to inhabit and be in.
Oh
Have you
yeah.
ever used Tom Waits as an influence in any of the roles you've gotten?
Oh, that's a good question. Not consciously, but I mean, yeah, his style is so iconic. I think he's absolutely kind of influenced my creative process, because of just um how he has such a wide swath of influence. And so I think he's certainly someone who's inspired me to kind of think outside the box as far as what might inform a character. And because he's always kind of done that kind of thing. I mean, I think his persona, he's kind of created, is very inspiring, and is always kind of inspired to me. Like, I think he's that kind of person who he's one of those guys who like kind of will pick up an affectation, and then over time that just becomes part of who you are. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that's very that I think was something that was very inspiring to me. That's something that I definitely took to, both in my, performances in my life, is just, that kind of thing of, just using performance as a way to kind of make it through the world, because I was kind of an awkward kid. You've kind of find little affectations that kind of, that you kind of use as armor. Seeing what he was doing with that was definitely a big inspiration for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. The film was shot in San Francisco and LA, during a tour that they were doing after Frank's Wild Years had been released.
Yeah, I was at the Warfield and the Wiltern, respectively. Yeah.
People did get frustrated, especially critically. New York Times said it was frustrating and off-putting, and the Washington Post said it was more of an indulgence than a concert. But I loved what Tom Waits said about it. He said, what we tried to avoid is having a concert film that felt like a stuffed bird. I tried to film it like a Mexican cockfight instead of an air-conditioned concert footage film. Now that it's completed, I would not have my underwear coming out the back of my pants like I did, but there's always something you want to change after it's over. And that seems like pretty good description of what this film is.
A Mexican cockfight is, yeah, that's about right. Yeah, it is. Watching it is disjointed, and there, whereas, as you said, like songs are interrupted. He has these little kind of performances that they shot in and around the Warfield Theater, where he's basically playing the Frank O'Brien character, kind of either as a ticket taker or kind of a guy at the, kind of the clerk at the desk or that sort of thing, or just kind of going about his day, and so that kind of stuff gets kind of cut in, kind of odd moments, and so there is something disjointed about that, but I think it's absolutely in keeping with his with his music and his his style performance, and it is it's not something to just come into without any context of who Tom Waits is as a performer.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Neil Young's Rust Never Sleeps, in terms of sometimes you get a 3-minute shot and it's like the most exquisite performance, but sometimes you're like, I want to see Marc Ribot. He's doing something amazing and he's just in the darkness, right?
Yeah.
And it's just these choices in terms of how they filmed it, the limitations they had on the budget. Do you feel like he had a strong narrative sense making this film, or is it something that you think that maybe he was just like, read into it whatever you want to read into it?
Yeah, I do wonder about that. I think because I think it's definitely, and there's elements of it that are definitely informed by the play, and I have, unfortunately there's no I think I read a transcript of it years ago in high school.
Yeah, I did too. It's amazing that now that, like, you're like, no one documented this. It's just nowadays it would be done. It'd just be like, yeah, we're gonna just take some digital cameras and do this, or get audio at least.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it was more of an ordeal to, do that kind of thing, be more of a production, whereas now, yeah, you just do it. It's which built into the budget. But so unfortunately you don't have that comparison, and a lot of it is inspired by both that trilogy of albums and or informed by that trilogy of albums and the stage play and that narrative in that play. As far as, I'd be curious if any of the staging of that show, of that play, was informed any of what we see on stage in the film.
It didn't, actually. Yeah, it wasn't related at all, because by the time the whole light box thing and the
the light
bathtub
boxes,
stuff, all that,
I know those
was
were built for the tour. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and so I think from reading the script of the play, it just seemed like it was much more of a like, again, very limited stage design in terms of, again, like a Steppenwolf production,
Yes.
not super like about the decoration, and about the performance.
Yeah.
Where this, I think they definitely, there was a description that they wanted it to have a Count Basie Art Deco Coco Cabana kind of look, and it definitely has that. It has this weird dark club feel, and again, it's very underlit.
Yeah.
And it's shot in 16 and blown up. So it has that really grainy feel. Some of it reminds me of like early Peter Greenaway almost, in terms of it's like unnerving. It's very arty for what it is, in terms of like how he decides to light himself. If he's going to just hold a light bulb up to his face as the sole light, if people are going to be just obscured, or how he's going to introduce the band.
Yeah. There's a little bit of, a little bit of that, a little bit of like the, and definitely, but along with definitely that kind of indie filmmaking in the 80s that was inspired a lot by like New York theater, where he's definitely kind of continuing the Frank O'Brien character kind of throughout, and I think you can kind of tell that it's some of that kind of does in moments inform the the character himself, and inform what he's doing on stage, not just in those interstitials.
Does the interstitial stuff work for you, like where he's singing and then he's got an umbrella on fire and there's some light geometric shapes
I love
kind
it.
of glowing?
Yeah. Again, it's a little jarring at first. Yeah. There's, if I'm getting really critical, I think some of it could be a little smoother. It's a little, but I love the idea of it. And there's moments that are great. Like I love the, when he's in bed and there's the feathers from the pillow that then cut to the feathers coming down on stage as he begins that first song of a Shore Leave, which is just great. Just that moment of the feathers coming down, him in kind of almost a Christ-like position as with the guitar line starts is great. It's just like one of those iconic. I think it's like an iconic film moment right there.
Yeah, I think about 5 minutes into the film, you kind of know what you're in for.
Yeah.
The way it starts, with him with the sleeping mask, like you said, and all that stuff, and the way they dip into it, you're like, is this going to be a dramatic telling of this? What's this movie theater? Is this a live audience? So during post-production, Tom Waits had his voice lowered to give it more power and make it unnerving. And if you watch it with that in mind, the part where he's like talking, it does have like a weird digital feel, like kind of that, Laurie Anderson when she talks, she puts on the lower register voice.
The voice changer,
And I wouldn't have picked up on it, but reading reviews of it and reading him talk about it, I just was like, oh, that's a really interesting choice in a concert film to play with your voice.
Because he was doing a lot of that already, like, he would use like a bullhorn in his recordings and stuff like that. He would find ways to alter his voice. I mean, and he was working on he's working on altering his voice since he was a young man. Just like he said in interviews that he purposefully like harmed his voice to kind of get that rasp that we know him for now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And the song choices are undeniably perfection. Hang on, St. Christopher, Telephone Call from Istanbul, Cold Cold Ground. Like when you get a performance,
16 Shells,
yeah, and then Clap Hands, and he is playing. It is very interesting. Like they definitely, like for time, like the band stands around him on the bed, and he's not singing, and then there's a scene where he's singing in the bathtub with Bubble. It's just very playful and weird. I just wanted to know, like, what's your favorite performance in this film?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many. I mean, the first performance of Shore Leave is so good. It just completely sets the tone of the whole film, and the way that he keeps more to the blues form. It's on the recording. It's more he kind of keeps it more of as he kind of sells it more as a spoken word piece, but in this one he sticks more closely to the blues format, which is really fun. The driving force of 16 Shells is just, I mean, it's just, I think in contrast to like the recording, which is also great, but like but that one is just like that pulsating beat of what he does with that is just it's just so electric. Like you just feel it, you feel it in your bones. It's so good. anyone could pick any song on this film.
Yeah, I think I lean to the ones that are a more straight performance, or at least you get to hear it all. Like
Yes.
Telephone Call from Istanbul, like they cut to him in the bathroom and you can kind of hear in the distance, like, and there's another song, I think it's Train Song, where
The Train
like
Song where it's kind of, it cuts.
into the ticket booth. He's like listening to it, and it's really,
it's cool. I think it's
interesting. It's cool.
Yeah, and I think it is, because that, I mean, Train Song I think works because it is just him on. I can see why they chose it, because it is just him on the piano the whole time. So it
Right.
is. So I think it does work to kind of break it up that way.
Yeah, they do. They're mostly capturing him, his back playing the piano. But that's one of the things that reminded me of the Neil Young film. Is sometimes you'll have like a 4.5-minute song and it's one shot, and it's kind of not the best angle, but you kind of just get hypnotized into the performance.
Yeah.
Because it's a weird angle. You're only getting part of the face, whether it's due to lighting or the film stock or just. I don't know. I feel like from what I've read, this was not a big production. They did not have like a ton of coverage. And so I think part of it makes me feel like they also had to lean on these interstitial things to be like, all right, like we need to break it up a bit to cover the edit a bit.
I can see that. It works because of, what he already had, based on, informed by the Steppenwolf show, and
Right.
just this, kind of, this trilogy of albums, and I think it's I think that really kind of pieces it together. It doesn't, especially if the context, it doesn't feel like it was just kind of, plucked out of a hat. It does feel
Right.
like an artistic choice.
Definitely. Yeah, by the time the Act 2 shows up and they're vacuuming it up on the floor, I was like, right. This reminded me so much of like late 80s indie filmmaking, especially American filmmaking. It was like, had that Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch energy, where like, of course, there's an Act 2 and an Act 3 and something. And the scene straight to the top, him do that live, which I always had a soft spot for, because it was just the sound of melting Vegas or whatever, or a lounge show that's just melting. And to hear them do it live so effectively is really impressive.
Yeah. Well, and they chose that one. I know on the album he does it both as kind of he calls it the rumba version and the big band version. And so having that melting Vegas big band version is great. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what songs you feel are missing in this film from the trilogy.
That's a good question. There's so many. I mean, Singapore is so iconic. That's that's would love to see that on stage. Would love to see the arrangement of that. A lot of stuff from Rain Dogs is definitely absent. So Tango Till the Shore and Jockey Full of Bourbon would be great. Songs like that, Underground. It's the nature of Tom Waits' songs. I mean, any of them, everything he does is so theatrical. I would, I'd love to see any, what any of that looks like on the stage. I think the selection is near perfect, and I think the way and the order of it is perfect. I don't, there's certainly nothing that would make it any better. It just as more of very, very good.
Yeah, I feel like a big thing lacking from it is seeing it on a computer screen or a TV.
Oh yeah,
I mean, seeing this in the theater with just blasting, I think I would have a completely different experience.
Hands down. Just like any any great concert film. I mean, obviously the one that would it gets referenced all the time, Stop Making Sense.
Right.
You know, where people would, get up, where people were literally dancing in the aisles, and
Yes.
and I don't know if this would have the same effect. Maybe in the right, if it was a room full of Tom Waits of diehard Tom Waits fans, yeah, you might have some people getting up and walking around.
I think people would. I bet they'd clap in between every song.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
And I saw the Stop Making Sense tour, and then I remember seeing it in the theater when it first came out, and yeah, even back then, people, myself included, got up and danced, and no one was self-conscious.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I hear everybody. Yeah, that's what I hear all. Yeah.
No one was self-conscious. It was so weird.
So cool.
It just started in the theater, and then people just couldn't help themselves. And the same thing happened seeing them live. It's like when somebody is so thoughtful in terms of how to tell a story in a concert, it's an art. And, it's seen once in a while. But like, I feel like this is, again, one of those films that I think would have really benefited from me seeing it in a dark theater.
Hands down. And I love, what you say about, telling a story in a concert. And I think, Tom Waits is definitely someone who does that. Laurie Anderson is another, Nick Cave is another. And, and I do think that this film definitely, in its kind of unique presentation is, really honors the kind of story that Tom Waits tells in his concerts.
And, after this point, I got really spotty with following Tom Waits because, when I was younger, it was like, you kind of gave someone 3 albums and then you were like, I'm into this now. It was like a 3-album thing. You didn't own everything by an artist yet.
Right.
So this is the part where Tom Waits does say goodbye to the Frank character. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, because obviously Frank begins in Swordfish Trombones with that classic monologue piece, The Frank's Wild Years. And then, so yeah, I mean, have you heard much about about how that kind of informed himself into Rain Dogs and then culminating in the play? I mean, was he writing Frank's Wild Years, the play, at the time of Swordfish Trombones?
It was just at the tail end.
Got it.
So Swordfish Trombones was done, but I believe, and you would know more than I would, but Frank was just a minor character on the early record.
Well, yeah, it was that monologue right.
And then he became a fixture in the following 2. And then he kind of put a name on it and kind of owned the character.
Right. Yeah. So right, because then he I mean, I think after this and after Frank's Wild Years and Big Time, he started working with Robert Wilson on Black Rider.
Right.
Yeah, and which would then turn into an album in '93. And they did a few collaborations, in '89 and '92, and then and then around that time he also put out Bone Machine, and so so then he was kind of going into kind of the period that we kind of he's kind of stayed in more or less for the last 30 years.
So did the Robert Wilson thing is a pretty interesting choice. Einstein on the Beach, and did other work with other musicians.
Actually, including David Byrne and Laurie Anderson.
Yes, right. Yeah. So was that his work with Robert Wilson? Was that filmed and documented?
I don't know if there's any. If there's any of that has been filmed, shockingly, I don't know if I don't know. I think you can find stills of it. I don't even know if I haven't even. I mean, he did his Alice in Wonderland adaptation, Alice. That I don't know. I haven't seen any stills from that production or anything.
Isn't that
Yeah,
weird? Like, that we can't watch like Catherine Wheel,
I know.
Twyla Tharp
Yeah,
and
I think you can.
David Byrne collaborating,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some stuff from like Einstein on the Beach and some of his other Philip Glass
yes.
stuff are out there. But yeah,
There was
there's
a documentary I remember
yeah,
at the time about Philip Glass that's when I was a kid I saw on PBS and had elements of like how Philip Glass, you know,
I
trained
remember that.
vocalists to do those weird arrangements and stuff and
Yeah,
vocal gymnastics.
yeah.
But yeah, I think we lost a lot because of the economics of
Oh, I
it.
know.
And also it was just part of their body of work. People were working fast. An album a year.
Yep.
Tom Waits is also making movies,
Hmm.
touring, and you're like, this is just where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if people necessarily thought that about the legacy because they were still active and it was like, this is not my greatest work.
Right. It was just like, what's next? What's next? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We don't, yeah, long before the days of people having social media managers and all of those things. And, where
Right.
everything is, where every moment is documented, it's so different.
The fact that, I have more social media presence now than Tom Waits did in 1988, except for it's just funny.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like didn't exist, but it's like I just would have liked to have seen like if Tom Waits had made this social media would have existed in 1988, and Frank was the character that he
Yeah.
was inhabiting, how he would have totally played with the character on social media. He would have just probably made endless media for it as the character.
Possibly. Yeah. Or he, I mean, he's very off the grid. So I think he
Yeah.
probably even back then would have eschewed, social media and that sort of thing. And,
Yeah.
but, not being, there was that whole lawsuit where he was trying to get his likeness, where he was suing for his likeness being used in like Doritos commercials.
Was it the cheetah?
No,
character?
it was a
What was
radio,
the character?
it was a radio spot. It was in the, I think the 80s or 90s, and like, and some, and they had come, I think they had wanted him to do like a radio spot, or it's either like a radio spot or a TV voiceover on a spot. And it was, I think you can find it online, but they got this,
Sound alike?
yeah, they got this like sound alike, this impersonator who was basically
Oh,
doing,
no.
it was like a riff on like Step Right Up from the 70s. Yeah, and everyone's a winner, yay, get up, get away, that whole thing. And it was just like, hey, check it out, hey, cool cats, Doritos, it was. And so yeah, so he sued for his likeness being used.
That's incredible. Yeah, you don't go to the source and then just move a millimeter away and just just get a sound alike.
Well, yeah, like what they did with for the Ghostbusters theme.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
trying to
not
get
gonna happen.
trying to get Huey Lewis, who turned it down, and then they basically had Chucky Brooker, or I forget who it was, forget the guy, but that guy who did who did the theme and basically was doing a riff on "I Want a New Drug."
Ray
Ray Parker
Jr.
Jr.
is his
Yeah,
name?
Ray Parker Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, but that same kind of they did like a Ghostbusters, just trying to get his yeah. I mean, I think one thing that's interesting about this is that it's and I don't know how how he became involved, but I know the Nicholas Roeg's son Luke was one of the main producers on this, which
Oh, wow.
and I know he produced a lot of his dad's movies, kind of in the later period in the 80s. Nicholas Roeg is, known for Walkabout. And Luke Roeg he's the young boy. And if anyone has seen Walkabout, he's the young boy in Walkabout.
Yes.
And
yeah, amazing.
yeah. And so, and, Nicholas Roeg's, known for The Man Who Fell to Earth and all of these, incredible films. So his son Luke started producing his films in the 80s and was one of the main producers on this. And I don't know how his involvement came about, but
it makes sense. I mean, Nicholas Roeg has a really otherworldly uncomfortable sense to his films.
Yeah, yeah.
And this film has definitely a like you could have told me, Nicholas Roeg was involved in this, and I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, I could see it. I would project into that a bit.
Yeah,
I don't know how much his stamp is on it, but I mean, the film is a weird film.
Yeah, and in fact, his song, the Tom Waits song "Invitation to the Blues" is used as the opening theme to his movie Bad Timing.
Oh wow! Right.
Yeah,
another light fare for
just a breeze. Yeah, a very life affirming film. Yeah.
Oh God, Galen, it's been so great having you here.
Yeah.
And I love that you picked something that's so close to your DNA and bones, and identity. At the end of every episode, I ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about.
Great.
So on a scale from 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how many burning umbrellas in the rain held by Tom Waits do you give this film?
I would say, I mean, this is very close to perfection. I would say I'd give it about 9.5.
9.5 burning umbrellas. That's what I have here. That is the correct answer.
Excellent.
So
I knew it.
You move on to the next round.
I knew it.
Thank you so much. It was great to see you.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. This has been a blast.